Yeah, so that's the, I think we need to,
Clarify that.
well, it's,
Thank you. I call the July 10th, 2023 Street Sidewalks and Bridges Committee meeting to order at 6:15 PM. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let the record show that all members of the committee are present. Councilwoman Georgia Awig, Councilman Dennis Booz, and Councilwoman Holly Swank. Also present are Mayor Kevin Corcoran, Kim Lieber, Director of Planning and Economic Development, and Christina Evanson, Engineer. Also present are Bruce Abens, Councilman Bruce Abens, Cliff Winkle, and Council President Jason Jacobs, and also Assistant Clerk of Council Fajabi Julian Gillum. So you have before you the Safety Committee minutes of April 15, 2019. Are there any corrections to the minutes from the committee? No? Hearing none, the minutes stand approved as written. We are here to discuss the following: an ordinance providing for the deletion and replacement of Chapter 1024 Sidewalks of the North Regional Streets, Utilities, and Public Services Code. Kim, could you give an overview of the legislation?
I can. Thank you, Madam Chair. The origin of this legislation began with a conversation between myself and the city engineer when we had a question about a section of our current Chapter 1024 Sidewalks chapter, specifically that related to a situation where sidewalk deposits could be waived based upon special hardships of property owners related to new construction. So when homes were being constructed far away from other locations with sidewalks, or there was some type of natural characteristic of the land that would make sidewalk construction difficult, our current code allows for the city not to collect deposits and for sidewalks then not to be constructed. So we had concerns about this approach. We are for sidewalks and for connectivity and want to ensure that our city is a walkable place. So this seemed to be a loophole that we wanted to close, where, you know, that property owner would not have to put up a deposit, would not have to construct, and really there was no recourse later, you know, coming back to ensure that a sidewalk one day would be constructed. So that caused us to meet, and in the process of meeting, I would say that we just took a much deeper dive into the chapter than we had originally anticipated doing. The current chapter is a little bit of a tossed salad of regulations that didn't seem to be very orderly. There's some confusion about when deposits would be taken, under what conditions they would be refunded. So as we started pulling in other city officials, our building official, our finance director, we found just a lot of concerns with the chapter that we thought we could tackle through a rewrite rather than just editing that one section. So that was the background, so the changes. So we also wanted to use this opportunity to more clearly define those construction activities that would require sidewalks. Currently, it talks about, you know, new residential or commercial construction, but we will often experience in Planning Commission, for example, a little bit of a fight to get sidewalks along the boundaries of a development. So, you know, the sidewalks provided in the front of the house, but if a development borders on a main road or the backs of the properties, that's not currently a requirement. So this explicitly would require all those developments to provide connectivity along the main public street upon which their entrances are located or upon which they have a development boundary. We also felt that there's certain types of commercial construction where maybe additions are being made where a sidewalk addition would be appropriate. So maybe not a small change to the exterior of a commercial property, but additions, we made it 500 square feet and larger would trigger that requirement if a sidewalk were not already present to then include one. So we're trying to be a little bit more explicit in the code of what conditions require sidewalks and include more situations where sidewalks would be included. We also wanted to split out, you know, there's really two scenarios of installing sidewalks. One is it's required by ordinance because you have a new construction, or the second where there's a sidewalk exists and it's either being replaced or it's a standalone project. So we wanted to create, you know, different processes. If somebody's coming in for a sidewalk permit as a one-off project, we really don't need to collect a big deposit. They're there to do the project. We don't need a deposit. We just need a permit fee. So we really wanted to distinguish between those two different scenarios. We also wanted to clarify what our construction requirements for sidewalks are. So we had some conflicting language. We cleaned that up, and we are also referencing a single city standard detail. So our engineering department will be creating a improved city detail, that standard detail that we could just send out to developers or contractors so that it's all the same. We had also had some kind of old provision that would allow 3.5-foot wide sidewalks in certain areas of town, and we eliminated that because we just didn't feel like that was really adequate. And we also are requiring curb ramps at crosswalks, so that is a more explicit requirement. So it's also on the deposit side, we're clarifying that a deposit will be made at the time a building permit is pulled. Right now it says at the time of application. And we also removed the explicit language about a 25% administrative surcharge. So for large projects, think big developer, you know, 25% surcharge where the deposit is equivalent to the cost of all sidewalks is just a huge amount of money. And then we were holding that for potentially a really long period of time just to refund it later after the sidewalks were installed. So we thought that that was not really reasonable. But the engineer will be, under this code, be able to establish the cost of sidewalks on an annual basis based upon inflation costs of doing the work. And as part of that, we can ensure that there's an if there's administrative work as a result, that is captured in those fees. The code, this amendment also more clearly defines those situations where the engineer might allow for a sidewalk not to be installed. So there might be those certain circumstances where a property owner wishes to request, and this would only be at their initiation, like they say, I meet one of these requirements and I'm going to apply for this waiver. And then we can consider the waiver, and it would continue to be a certain distance from other sidewalks, from schools or parks, or due to hardship. Maybe there's really steep ditches along a roadside, and they would have to culvert in order to install a sidewalk. That would be just an astronomical cost compared to just regular installation of sidewalks. Those might be situations where a waiver might be granted. But unlike today, where they simply then don't have to install and they don't pay, the city would collect a fee in lieu of that deposit. And so in that case, the city would divert those funds, that fee, into a connectivity account that could be used to then fund sidewalk and connectivity improvements, whether it's the actual installation of sidewalks or acquisition of property or creating links or trails or bike facilities. It could be earmarked for activities that would provide connectivity. So again, we're kind of closing that loop of the property owner that, hasn't had to contribute, and now everybody will contribute. Also, we are better defining the procedures for refunds of deposits. So we really have two situations when it comes to deposits. One is a property owner or developer has made a deposit and they have installed the sidewalk as required, and now we need to refund that deposit, but they haven't claimed it. So we have an unclaimed fund, and the code talks about how we'll address that unclaimed fund situation. And then we have the other situation, which is they've made the deposit, but they haven't installed the sidewalk in the required amount of time, in which case those funds can also be retained by the city and can be used to install those or other sidewalks. So we're just trying to clean up in the ordinance the understanding of what happens from start of the process to end of the process, and also then to provide opportunities to capture funds maybe that were kind of either not collected or floating off into the general fund just as unclaimed, but without a specific designation for how those funds would be used, because we do think it's important to ensure walkability in North Ridgeville. On that subject, the city had been approved for an active transportation plan through NOACA at the end of 2020. I believe the approval was granted through the NOACA board in 2021, and we've really kind of been waiting and working with NOACA since then to get that project underway. I think today was NOACA's deadline for submission of proposals for that plan, but that plan can help us create a citywide plan to create priorities about where some of these funds, when collected, could be earmarked and targeted. So that will be a good tool for us to have when completed to ensure that we're making wise sidewalk investments in our city. I believe our city engineer had some more comments about fees she wanted to share, but that's an outline of the changes of the ordinance.
I think we did an excellent job. Oh, thanks. I think we did an excellent job, Kim. I just want to reiterate that, just in the 4 years that I've been here, I've seen some opportunities where that were missed based on hardship requests, and there was nothing we could do. Our hands were tied. I had to grant them their request because whatever warranted the extreme cost or extreme work, I felt was necessary. So I just think this is an opportunity for us to capture those costs and put them to best use somewhere else for connectivity within the city.
Okay, thank you for your comments. So does the committee have any questions or comments? Each one of you?
Madam President, first, I'm in favor of all those changes. I think it's good. The reasoning is there. Again, we don't want to leave money on the table. In the same regard, we want to have our city walkable. And so as much as we can do that, this legislation covers that. Plus, it takes care of the salad type of language that was in the current ordinance, that needed to be there, that made it frustrating for you folks to try to deal with it. I also think, and I've advocated several times, and I didn't want to, delay this legislation to talk about it. But at some point, the city needs to make a determination when we're going to require sidewalks everywhere. The city of Westlake did it. They did it over a 20-year plan. And guess what? 20 years is a long time, but after 20 years, they have sidewalks. And there's lots of places in our community, especially in Ward 2, Ward 4, that don't have sidewalks. Luckily, we had the school program that Mayor Corcoran led when he was on city council to get funding for sidewalks near our schools, of the Safe School program. That helped quite a bit. But we need to do that because, you know, I understand it's a big cost for the city because you can't force someone to put in a sidewalk unless you're prepared to pay for it, and we don't have those funds. I get that, but I think if you spread it over a long period of time, we can somehow budget for it, and then in 20 years, we're good to go. But no, I agree with the changes that you made, and I want to thank you for the due diligence and all the hard work that you put into it, both of you. Thank you.
Through the chair. I have a question on page 9, 1024.06. It states in number 2, the property is not within 2,500 feet of a city park or a public or private school measured from any property corner. Now that the school is doing the 2-mile state minimum, children have to walk to school, should that be changed, or do you think that's still feasible? That might be a question for the mayor.
Well, you know, this section pre-existed in the old section, although I think we did amend it to be consistent because number 1 and number 2 were, I think, different. Yep, number 1 previously was a sidewalk doesn't exist within 2,000 feet in any direction, and so we made them both the same at 2,500. I guess I appreciate the concern that that would cause with the school situation, but I also think that might be hopefully a temporary condition that would exist in terms of the busing situation. But if council is interested in creating a higher standard, I would just maybe suggest that both 1 and 2 be amended to be the same distance, so it's not 2 separate distances in that section. If you think it appropriate to make it, you know, so that there would be less likely to grant a waiver because of the proximity to the school, I have no objection to that.
You get council thoughts on
Okay.
that?
Mayor Corcoran, do you have any comments?
I'd just like to point out that particular provision only applies to new construction. So if we're talking about a citywide sidewalk plan, and Dennis, you referenced Westlake. Westlake's plan was that the residents had to pay for it themselves. And so that was, that condition can still exist if we want to create or an obligation on everybody to install sidewalks, regardless of that provision. You know, we could put that in place.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the other city council members have any comments or questions?
I had a question in regard to granting a waiver. So it's my understanding that the fee that they would pay would be equal to the amount of the deposit? Is that correct?
Well, so what we do right now is every year at the beginning of the year, we come up with a construction cost, which is based on the previous year's linear footage plus the additional cost index based on the ENR, which we use for many of our other ordinances as well. So then we apply that additional cost, and then we add 25% onto that as an administrative fee. So what we're looking at is eliminating, or maybe a small percentage more, so not 25%, because that's pretty exorbitant for some of the bigger projects. So I would just move forward, continuing with that construction cost index increase every year with the price that we already have on the books, and maybe just add a couple percentage for administration for the initial deposit. So as Kim mentioned, it works in both ways. This would still be the cost for the in lieu, and it would also be the cost for the deposit just to hold their monies for installation later for the mostly for residential development. So it'd be the same price.
The amount of the deposit would roughly be the amount that it would be to construct the sidewalks?
Correct. And just for my own benefit this year, I reached out I got 2 quotes from contractors just to make sure that we are, you know, within a reasonable unit rate, and we are. So I feel very comfortable of what we are currently charging.
Anything else?
They also had gist of that is that, you know, if you're granted a waiver, you pay the fee and don't have to install the sidewalk. I just didn't think the language there made it really clear that the resident would forego the installation of the required sidewalk. So I just was suggesting that perhaps we amend that to say, it shall be the option of the property owner upon application as approved by the city engineer and then add to forego the installation of a required sidewalk and then as it continues to make payment of the sidewalk fee for the sidewalk.
Does that sound good, Kim?
Yes.
Okay.
We're
Does the audience have any questions or comments about the ordinance? Yep, Frank? Do you want to get up to the podium and state your name and address for the record?
Yes, good evening. My name is Frank Toth. I reside at 35300 Nicky Avenue. And last week I had the opportunity to correspond with Director Lieber. She went through this legislation very concisely for me and spelled out the different points and the collection areas that you are establishing through this legislation to move forward, okay? However, there is really no redress for the areas of the city right now that do not have sidewalks. If there's an addition, there's this discussion of deposits being forfeited into an account that would be used to do something like that. And while it may not be politically palatable, sidewalks are probably a necessary fundamental thing for a city moving forward. I was involved with the One Vision project, which was an opportunity, and the committee on there was expressing the desire to move Ridgeville forward through building this recreation center, some new schools. However, we have this fundamental need right now where children are not going to be able to have sidewalks to walk on to get to school. Is that situation temporary? Is it permanent? It's difficult to judge at this point in time, but the condition exists, and it isn't a condition that came up overnight. This is something that the city has, I don't want to say ignored, but has not addressed over the years. And it's come to the point now where if Ridgeville truly does want to move forward and become a progressive type city, you're going to need sidewalk connectivity, especially to your schools and your public buildings. I would urge council to consider that moving forward, to possibly discuss some actions or some ways that you could possibly manage installing these sidewalks in these higher trafficked areas at first, of course, but eventually do try to make the entire city walkable. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Toth. Any other comments from the audience? Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I did have a question. So the language to waive the necessity for a sidewalk really hasn't changed. This is capturing the deposit. Is that fair to say?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay, so financial concerns are never really a reason to not put your sidewalk in, is what I'm just pointing out here, because it's not on here and it shouldn't be.
Right, the cost of the sidewalk is not the hardship.
Yeah, don't come and
It's
say
the
cost
additional
because
work
you're
that
not
you
here.
might have to do.
Okay.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Okay, sounds good. I would agree that it would be great to have sidewalks throughout the city, but that comes at a cost to the residents. But I think it would be wise or beneficial to the residents as well as to businesses within the city and the schools and so forth to have sidewalks throughout the city eventually. But this ordinance is not really addressing that. So I would entertain a motion to send it back to city council for consideration or to send it back with the change that President Jacobs recommended.
We would have
Do
to
you
make
want-
a motion to do that change.
Right.
I'll second that.
For clarification, can you repeat your recommended change so I can repeat it for the record?
Yeah, so it's, in section 1024.06A, we would add the words, after the words city engineer, we would add the words to forego the installation of a required sidewalk. And
we would forego the installation of a city sidewalk.
Required side.
Required,
We can also amend it at council. You guys
true.
send it back the way it is, and we can amend it.
Okay, so I'll make the motion to add in 1024.06 under section A, after the word engineer, forego the installation of a required sidewalk.
And I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Yes.
Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion is carried, and we'll send it back to council for approval there.
We need a
And,
motion for that.
okay, all
I'll
right,
make a motion that we send this back to council for the recommendation for consideration.
I'll second that.
okay, all those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carried. We'll send that back to council. So, with no further business before the committee, the meeting is now adjourned.